What if we told you that some of hockey's most dynamic duos actually hated each other's guts? The on-ice action looked flawless, and the highlight reels were off the charts, but behind the scenes, it was chaos. We're talking punch-ups at practice, wars in the dressing room, and betrayals that tore teams and friendships apart. These dynamic NHL pairings proved that you can have chemistry on the ice and warfare off it. It's time to meet the greatest NHL duos who hated each other. Hall of Famer Jeremy Roenick spent the final 2 seasons of his career with the San Jose Sharks, chasing the Stanley Cup that eluded him throughout his decorated run. Roenick was even considering hanging up the skates before the 2007 offseason brought an opportunity to join a stacked Sharks roster, featuring names like Joe Thornton, Joe Pavelski, Rob Blake, and Patrick Marleau. Marleau, the longtime captain, had been a Shark since being drafted 2nd overall in 1997 and was considered one of the franchise's cornerstone players. Roenick, meanwhile, was brought in to fill a bottom 6 role and would see reduced ice time compared to the club's younger core. The two laced up together for 2 seasons, both ending in conference final exits that kept Roenick from ever lifting the cup. Over that stretch, Roenick chipped in 46 points across 111 games, while Marleau notched 119 points in a more prominent role. It wasn't until after Roenick's retirement that the frost between the two became public.
Was Patrick Marleau hurt on that play trying to get the puck from that?
Yeah, he's hurt. He's hurt. Right here, he's hurt.
While covering games as a studio analyst, Roenick would criticize Marleau's effort and abilities. Some believed it was just Roenick doing his job in front of the cameras. However, the frequency and tone of his comments made it clear that this was personal. He reportedly singled out Marleau, and things escalated further when Roenick's memoir was published, where he named Marleau in a list of 5 players I hated during my career and described him as a skilled player who lacked heart and edge. In the book, Roenick also detailed visiting Marleau's home to air frustrations about his leadership, but according to Roenick, the sit-down went nowhere. "I could tell 10 minutes into our conversation that I was wasting my time," he wrote. He considered my arrival at his house an intrusion. He listened to me, but he never did anything to change the way he was. Marleau hit back at Roenick's criticisms, writing in a message to a journalist, "To say that I don't care about my play or winning or being gutless is absurd," Marleau wrote in a text message. "I wouldn't have left home at 14 years old to play a game I didn't care about. I want to win more than anyone. Just because I don't jump up and down acting like a buffoon on the ice doesn't mean I'm not into it." The beef between the two ultimately seems a little one-sided, with Roenick holding most of the animosity. It isn't completely clear what the problem he has with Marleau is, but it seems likely that he holds a grudge of some sort against his former captain for their inability to capture the Stanley Cup ring Roenick so desired. Subban and Gallagher played together on the Montreal Canadiens from 2012 to 2016, and for the most part, seemingly had no issues. But that changed in their final season together, when they began to get physical during practice, being filmed butting heads on more than one occasion. In these clips, the two were seen wrestling, chirping non-stop, and at one point, Subban even knocked Gallagher's helmet clean off. Teammates could be seen trying to cool things down. Subban had a reputation for being a fiery presence in the locker room and had clashed with teammates before. So initially, this looked like your typical practice dust-up, the kind of thing that happens all the time in a competitive NHL environment. The issues between Subban and Gallagher became more public after Subban had been traded to the Nashville Predators, and the two were now competitors. This was showcased in the first matchup between the Preds and Habs in the 2016 season. Almost from the start of the game, Subban and Gallagher were physical with one another, with Subban wrestling Gallagher to the ground in a skirmish after Gallagher had made contact with the Predators' netminder, Rynek. As the officials tried to separate the two, Gallagher gave Subban a face wash, leading to Subban's comments after the game.
Well, I told him that called him short. He didn't like that too much.
That bad blood spilled over again in a February 2018 rematch. Gallagher ripped a shot that clipped Subban in the ankle, dropping the defenseman. Gallagher buried the rebound and celebrated with extra flair, skating past the Preds bench with some chirps for Subban. The Habs would go on to win the game, and afterwards, an agitated Gallagher tried deflecting attention away from Subban.
I don't know why you're asking about him. I think he was They got a lot of good players. They just didn't really have enough, but we battled hard tonight and just didn't get the result.
Even after Subban moved on to the New Jersey Devils, the two kept the rivalry alive in their matchups. Subban eventually followed the Jeremy Roenick playbook, continuing to throw shade at Gallagher from behind the desk as an on-air analyst, notably calling out Gallagher in 2024 for a questionable hit on Adam Pelech. At the end of the day, this one feels like a straight-up clash of personalities. Subban was always vocal, flashy, and wore his passion on his sleeve, while Gallagher carried himself as a more reserved, straight-laced player. It's no surprise those styles didn't mesh well in the same locker room. This next feud is one of the more recent additions to the list, and it features Elias Pettersson and JT Miller of the struggling Vancouver Canucks. This rift between the two was widely seen as the reason for the Canucks dealing Miller to the New York Rangers in January 2025. Pettersson was drafted by the Canucks with the 5th overall pick in 2017, while Miller was traded to Vancouver during the 2019 offseason. Their personalities and play styles couldn't have been more opposite. Miller brought an in-your-face, vocal leadership style, while Pettersson preferred to let his play do the talking, keeping a cool, quiet demeanor both on and off the ice. When Miller first arrived, the trade was seen as an overpay for what many thought would be a middle six depth guy. Instead, he shocked everyone by emerging as a key offensive weapon, logging a 103-point campaign in 2023-24. Pettersson, meanwhile, had all the hype of a franchise cornerstone and, for a time, lived up to it, including a 102-point season in 2022-23. But the past few seasons have raised question marks surrounding Pettersson's commitments, and there were rumors he showed up to training camp in 2024 out of shape and unmotivated. His play had regressed, and he only ended up notching 45 points in 2024-25, raising serious doubts about his $11.6 million annual cap hit. The tension between the pair was kept mostly behind closed doors, with only rumors hinting at any tension between the two. Some have speculated that Miller's intensity may have been a source of disruption for Pettersson. Strangely enough, when Miller took a leave of absence from the team mid-season, Pettersson's numbers rebounded almost immediately, including a 10-game heater where he was pacing for a 123-point year. But when Miller returned, Petey hit a wall, going pointless for 7 straight games. The writing was on the wall, and the Canucks finally pulled the trigger in January 2025, trading Miller to the Rangers. Neither player has spoken publicly about what really went down between them, so all we can do is speculate. But it seems likely that Miller, who is known for wearing his heart on his sleeve, voiced his frustration over Pettersson's dip in effort, and that may have been too much for the more introspective Swedish center to handle. Then again, the Canucks have been a mess for some time now, so this may just be one of many aspects that caused friction between the two centers. Evander Kane and Dustin Byfuglien were teammates for 5 seasons, first with the Atlanta Thrashers and then with the Winnipeg Jets following their relocation. Kane was the Jets' mercurial and talented youngster, while Byfuglien was by then a seasoned veteran, and both were considered essential parts to this new era of Winnipeg hockey. Throughout his career, Kane has carried a reputation as a challenging presence in NHL locker rooms, with several former teammates voicing frustrations about his off-ice conduct. Early on, though, there weren't many signs of friction between Byfuglien and Kane specifically, and the two seemed to play together without much incident. All that would change on a road trip to Vancouver in February 2015, where an infamous incident took place between the two. Kane was a healthy scratch for the matchup with the Canucks, and it was later revealed that it was due to an episode where Kane showed up to a mandatory team meeting with attire not meeting team requirements. It has been widely reported that Kane showed up in a tracksuit, though Kane later claimed it was simply a jacket and jeans that crossed the line. Whatever the wardrobe issue, what happened next has been confirmed by multiple teammates and reported widely in NHL media. Byfuglien apparently took particular issue with Kane's behavior and let him hear about it, and later threw the tracksuit or jacket and jeans into a hot tub or shower, depending on who is telling the story, at the team's facility. When Kane was later asked about the incident, he responded, obviously not the ideal spot I want to be in right now, but we're a team, needed a guy to fill that spot, so I'm the lucky guy. Kane's role in the team had become untenable, and he was dealt to the Buffalo Sabres just 5 days later. Byfuglien, for his part, would only comment, I'm sure you have rules in your household, and if the kids don't stick to it, you've got to discipline them. It is what it is," showing that he would simply not put up with this kind of behavior from a teammate. Although this was the one clear example of a rift between Kane and Byfuglien during their time in Winnipeg, shortly after Kane's trade, a photo was released showing Byfuglien walking by a smiling Kane who gives him a pat on the shoulder. As Kane does this, Byfuglien is giving Kane the middle finger, and teammates have said this perfectly summarizes the relationship between the two players. The next pairing features two players whose tenures loom large in the minds of Philadelphia Flyers fans, whether it be positive or negative. Rod Brind'Amour joined the Flyers via trade in 1991 and became one of the club's most beloved fan favorites, earning a reputation for his consistent two-way play, work ethic, and Ironman durability. Brind'Amour logged 633 games in orange and black, rarely missing time, and always logging big minutes down the middle. When he was traded to the Carolina Hurricanes in 2000, it was a gut punch for Flyers fans. Eric Lindros, on the other hand, produced more mixed opinions when it comes to his legacy as a Philadelphia Flyer. The ultra-talented and often injured superstar spent 8 seasons in Philly, and even his arrival there was a spectacle, as he was drafted first overall by the Nordiques, but publicly stated he would refuse to play in Quebec, leading to a 3-team trade that landed Lindros in a Flyers uniform. Lindros could be one of the best players in the NHL when healthy, but this became increasingly rare as his career went on, and his highest appearance total in a season was 73 games. He was also seen by many to be brash, arrogant, and overhyped, but when he was on it, his abilities were undeniable, and he proved that by capturing a Hart Trophy in a lockout-shortened 1994-95 season. Lindros would go on to captain the Flyers for the final 6 years of his stint in Philadelphia. Brind'Amour served as an alternate captain under Lindros and anchored the Flyers' second line, often stepping up in Lindros' absence due to frequent injuries. But beneath the surface, a personal rift was reportedly simmering. Rumors swirled around an alleged extramarital affair between Lindros and Brind'Amour's wife, an accusation that, if true, would create an unfixable fracture in any dressing room, let alone with both players serving in leadership roles. While unconfirmed, some reports even claimed the fallout led to a locker room altercation, with Brind'Amour allegedly physically confronting Lindros. Whether or not fists flew, Brind'Amour is said to have issued an ultimatum. Either he or Lindros had to go. The Flyers eventually dealt Brind'Amour to the Hurricanes. The Flyers would end up ruining their decision as Lindros' injury problems persisted, and Brind'Amour would go on to win a Stanley Cup, captaining the Hurricanes. It seems that since then, Brind'Amour and Lindros have somewhat put things in the past, as they hugged one another during a 50th anniversary celebration for the Flyers franchise in 2016. Alexander Ovechkin and Evgeny Malkin are arguably the two greatest Russians to ever play in the NHL. Ovechkin surpassed Wayne Gretzky's legendary all-time goal-scoring record in 2025, while Malkin has lifted multiple Stanley Cups and tallied over 1,300 career points. But despite being icons of Russian hockey, the two didn't always see eye to eye. The two players were drafted first and second overall in the 2004 NHL draft and had been very close, even being roommates while playing for the Russian hockey team together. But within a few years of entering the league, that relationship had seemingly broken down, as displayed by their animosity towards one another when facing each other on the ice. They laid big hits on each other, and although this could be seen as just physical play, there seemed to be something more significant beneath the surface. The tension was further escalated during a Hart Trophy ceremony when the two could seemingly not look each other in the eyes. The physical play between the two continued in matchups between the Capitals and Penguins, but it wasn't until a later interview that the root of the issue was revealed. Malkin explained that the relationship broke down after an off-ice incident where Ovechkin allegedly punched Malkin's agent at a Moscow nightclub. After that, the two went radio silent for 2 full seasons. They would eventually make up and put the past behind them. Russian national team captain Ilya Kovalchuk stepped in and helped broker peace between the two stars. They publicly displayed their improved relationship during an NHL All-Star Skills Challenge, where Malkin assisted Ovechkin during his performance. Even after their reconciliation, their on-ice matchups continued to include plenty of physicality and highlight reel hits. But today, Ovi and Gino appear to have a respectful, if not especially warm relationship, an evolution that mirrors their maturation from fiery rivals into respected veterans of the game. This next pairing features a classic tale of a young up-and-comer butting heads with a veteran in a case of clashing personalities and locker room politics. Mike Ribeiro was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in the second round in 1998 and would spend his first few years in the league bouncing around between the Habs and their AHL affiliate. He started to make a name for himself during the 2003-04 season as their second-string center, and it seems that his success on the ice began getting to his head. Reports say that Ribeiro felt he deserved to be a top liner and let it be known. The problem? Montreal's top-line center was Saku Koivu, team captain, franchise cornerstone, and one of the most respected players in Habs history. Koivu was everything Ribeiro wasn't: disciplined, selfless, and universally admired in the locker room. It didn't take long for tensions to boil over. The two would play a few more seasons together in Montreal, ending with Ribeiro's trade to the Dallas Stars, but Ribeiro still seems to hold animosity towards Koivu, questioning his leadership in interviews. Koivu, for his part, has not commented further on the spat and has retired one of the most beloved players to have played for the Canadiens. The next duo who hated one another brings us to two players whose beef got deeply personal and took things far beyond the boards. The two in question are Erik Karlsson and Mike Hoffman, who spent 9 seasons together with the Ottawa Senators. Karlsson is a Senators legend and would end up as captain while being one of the best two-way defensemen in the league. Hoffman, meanwhile, was a role player for the majority of his Senators career and spent 7 total years in Ottawa before leaving via free agency. The rift between them exploded in the wake of a personal tragedy. In 2018, Karlsson and his wife lost their unborn child. In the months that followed, Karlsson's wife filed a protection order against Hoffman's fiancée, Monica Carrick, accusing her of sending anonymous online messages harassing the Karlssons and mocking the death of their son. The messages, described as threatening and vile, allegedly wished injury upon Erik and included threats aimed at his wife and unborn child. The messages were sent via anonymous accounts, and both Hoffman and Carrick denied any role in their distribution, but the wives of other Senators players supported Karlsson's wife. The allegations ultimately remained unproven in court, and both players would shortly leave the Senators. But the contention between them remained, as when they faced off the following season, Hoffman was constantly trying to egg Karlsson on to drop gloves and fight during games. This hateful duo is one of the uglier examples, as it spilled off the ice and involved their respective spouses, and although the allegations ultimately went unproven, the hatred they showed one another after the incident was settled suggests there was some truth to it. These disputes do not get any prettier, and this one has all the makings of a locker room disaster, another alleged case of an extramarital affair between teammates and their spouses. Gary Leeman and Al Iafrate were teammates on the Toronto Maple Leafs during the late 1980s. Leeman was a speedy forward who provided the Leafs with goals, while Iafrate was a defenseman. He was known for his vicious slap shot, one of the hardest in hockey history, and was considered one of the best blue liners the Leafs had in years. The dispute between the two men allegedly spawns from an incident where Leeman had an affair with Iafrate's wife. As we've seen in prior incidents, this kind of behavior between teammates creates an untenable situation, and usually someone needs to be traded. This is exactly what happened, but it was Iafrate who ended up being sent away, maybe because Leeman was coming off a strong season with 50-plus goals. But that wasn't the end of it. Rumors have circulated for years that Iafrate either confronted and physically fought Leeman, or that enforceman John Kordic stepped in and did it for him, whether on Iafrate's behalf or as an act of solidarity. Interestingly, it was Kordic who got traded first, which seems to support that version of the story. It isn't hard to see why these two hated each other, and in hindsight, it seems wild that the Leafs would side with Leeman over one of their best defenders in an incident where Leeman was allegedly at fault. The best defensive pairing in hockey during the 1980s arguably didn't play in the NHL. But in Russia, Alexei Kasatonov and Vyacheslav Fetisov starred for CSKA Moscow and the Soviet national team, and their on-ice synergy made it seem as if they shared a kind of hockey telepathy. They also shared a close relationship during their years together in Russia, but their connection would begin to fray due to a political issue relating to the rights of Soviet hockey players. Fetisov was drafted by the New Jersey Devils in 1983, but was forbidden from going to play hockey in America by the Soviet government. Fetisov advocated for more freedoms for Soviet hockey players to further their careers abroad. After expressing his wish to do so, he was even threatened with being sent to Siberia if he didn't apologize for his remarks. Kasatonov, however, did not support his line-mate's stance and reportedly informed Soviet authorities of Fetisov's intention to defect. That betrayal effectively ended their friendship and possibly saved Kasatonov's own career. Fetisov would eventually go to America and join the Devils in 1989, and much to everyone's surprise, Kasatonov did the same. Their on-ice chemistry continued despite their dispute, and teammates and coaches have said that the two didn't even speak to one another. Despite this, they remained professional, and their time together on the blue line was largely successful. Fetisov would go on to have a successful NHL career, winning the Stanley Cup with the Detroit Red Wings in 1995, while Kasatonov continued in America until 1996. This feud remains one of the most unique and compelling in hockey history, not just for the personal fallout, but the Cold War era politics that defined it. The fact both players continued to dominate as a pairing, despite their silent standoff, only adds to its mystique. And there you have it. From locker room fights to Cold War betrayals, these NHL duos proved you don't have to like each other to dominate on the ice. So, which feud cost their franchise the most? Let us know in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more videos.